In chapter 5 of Daniel, we saw where King Belshazzar throws a huge party. A hand appears and writes on the wall. Daniel's brought in to interpret the writing. The writing announces the impending judgment of the king that very night. Due to the king's arrogance, debauchery, and disregard for God, he is killed that very evening by the Medes and Persians as they overthrow the city. Today we'll be looking at the last chapter that we examine in Daniel. We won't be covering chapters 7 through 12. These chapters cover Daniel's dreams and visions, much of which parallel with what we studied in the book of Revelations. Daniel chapter 6 is an account of Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. Most of us, when we read this story, we focus on God saving Daniel while in the lion's den. However, today we will approach this story from a different perspective. Let's begin by reading verses 1 through 4. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Verse 3 tells us that Daniel had distinguished himself as a result of his exceptional qualities. In fact, so much that Darius had planned to elevate him from one of the 3 top administrators to being over the whole kingdom. The question we can ask ourselves is, what were these characteristics that Daniel had that so set him apart from the other administrators? And at an early age, Daniel was distinguished. He had already distinguished himself to the point where he was selected to be assigned to the king Nebuchadnezzar's court. Daniel chapter 1 verse 4 tells us that he showed an aptitude in every kind of learning. He was well informed and he was quick to understand. Likewise, many of you, like Daniel, have an exceptional intellect. Daniel was gifted with the ability to learn many things, but not only that, he was able to take that learning and that knowledge and apply it to various situations in a practical manner. There are many people who know many things, but they're unable to take that knowledge and use it in a practical way. They lack wisdom in applying the knowledge that they do possess. Daniel, not so. So his wisdom was one factor that distinguished him above others, but that was not the most important characteristic that distinguished him above others. One thing that we can assume about Daniel was that he was not trying to promote himself to get ahead. From the very beginning, Daniel's time in the city of Babylon, he was an exile. He was basically a slave. He remained an exile even after the Medes and Persians overthrew the Babylonian Empire. People who are looking to get ahead will often promote themselves in the eye of the public. Politicians hire campaign managers, movie stars hire agents, businessmen hire public relations managers, writers hire publicists. They are all hoping to promote their own image. This was not the case for Daniel. He did not distinguish himself due to self-promotion. When people get famous or in high positions in a company or government, some people have a tendency to become jealous of their status. That was the case with Daniel. The 2 other administrators, as well as some of the satraps, became jealous of Daniel's rise to power. As a result, they plotted to have him deposed of his authority. They began a campaign to get rid of him. Where was the first place they looked? Verse 4 tells us that where they began their search. They examined his conduct of government affairs. They did an internal audit. They looked for any sign of impropriety, but they were unable to identify any wrongdoing. Today, how often do we see businessmen, politicians, even pastors who have an air of respectability, but upon further examination, we find corruption, dishonesty, and even infidelity? One such recent example is George Santos, the newly elected government representative from New York. Santos' pristine public persona quickly came crashing down when it was exposed that he had lied about his prestigious education, substantial career on Wall Street, and his impressive real estate assets, none of which was true. Furthermore, he claimed to be a graduate of Baruch College and also studied at New York University. In fact, he hadn't even graduated from college. He had promoted himself in the public square, but the perception was unsustainable. His lack of character, his lack of integrity caught up with him. Unlike Santos, when the two administrators and the satraps examined Daniel's record, it was flawless. They were unable to discredit his work. So they continued to plan a more dastardly plan to get rid of him. Let's read verses 5 through 9. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis of charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue a decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. What was Daniel's response to the king's decree? Would he bow his knee to the king and disregard Jehovah? Would he continue to pray to Jehovah, but only do it in secret? Let's find out his response beginning in verse 10. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened out toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went up to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of your exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Daniel did continue to pray to Jehovah, and he didn't do it in such a manner that where no one could see him. He did what was his habit. He went into his house, he opened the window and faced towards Jerusalem, and he prayed as he was his custom. Every day he would open the window, face Jerusalem, and pray to Jehovah his God 3 times a day. He had a habit. He had a routine. How many of you have a routine? A routine to spend time with the Lord every day, a time to listen to him through his word, a time to share with him your concerns. Notice in verse 10, Daniel had concerns about this edict from the king. He had concerns. He was asking God to help him. Do you bring your concerns to God? 1 Peter 5:17 tells us, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. We don't serve a God who is oblivious to our situation, a God who doesn't care. He's a God who knows our struggles, a God who loves us and is here to help us in our times of trouble. Do you take your concerns to him? Do you take your struggles to him? Do you have a habit of spending time with him on a daily basis? If not, I would encourage you to begin doing that today. God is a God who loves you and he wants a relationship with you. To foster any relationship with someone, you must spend time together. God wants you to spend time with him. Daniel's disregard for the king's edict and his loyalty to Jehovah testifies to Daniel's character. He was the same kind of man in private as he was in public. Unlike George Santos, who I mentioned earlier, Daniel had a solid character in private and also in public and also in his professional life. Daniel had a flawless character. Daniel had integrity. So what was the result of Daniel's disobedience to the king? The king had no other choice than to throw him into the lion's den. The king was restless throughout the night while Daniel was in the lion's den. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. I'm sure that he also did some praying for this man that he held in high regard. A man that had so distinguished himself that the king had planned to put him in charge of the entire kingdom. In the morning, the king rushed to the lion's den to find Daniel unharmed. God had closed the lion's mouth. So what was the result of Daniel's faithfulness to the Lord? What effect did Daniel's integrity have on others? It definitely had effect on the king. He ordered a proclamation to all the world. We see it beginning in verse 26. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is a living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Not only did Daniel's integrity have an effect on the king, but it also resulted in the king encouraging all people to fear the one true living God. How much impact do you have on those around you? Are you the same person that people see in public as the person you are when you are home with your family? Are you the same person that people see in public as you are in private? To have a positive impact on others, family, friends, coworkers, strangers, you must be a person of integrity. Psalm 37:18 tells us, the blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. Are you blameless before God? Are you blameless before your family? Are you blameless before your coworkers? Father God, help each one of us to be blameless. Help each one of us to be men and women of integrity.